Kia ora guys, welcome back to the Black Jersey. My name's Max, I'm the host of this channel, and for today's video I've got a video on the Ireland Rugby Depth Chart from 2020 to 2023. Andy Farrell has done an absolutely amazing job as the Irish head coach, and I've referred to him many times as their greatest head coach of all time. So in today's video we're essentially going to be looking at how well he's managed the minutes of his players during his tenure as the Ireland coach, and we're going to see, I guess, how important each player is to their position and who's where in the pecking order ahead of the World Cup, now that we've done a bit of a prediction on their World Cup squad. For showing how this depth chart works, as we can see, the first choice player is always going to be denoted by the colour red, the second choice will be denoted by the colour blue, with the third in green, and the fourth choice player in yellow. So ideally, in my opinion, the guy who's got the most share of the minutes is about at 40% of the chart or so, and obviously you do have a third and fourth choice player just ready to go if you do have to cover some injuries and stuff ahead of the World Cup. So unfortunately though, not every minute can be protected, not everyone can be safeguarded, so if a player does become ineligible for selection due to injury, in the case of nations such as Ireland moving overseas, or in other cases retirements, their share of the chart will be validated, so it will be highlighted in the colour grey. You'll see such a phenomenon happening. I'm wearing my Chiefs jersey right now. John Ryan, he's playing for us over here in New Zealand. John Ryan, for example, is no longer eligible, so he's going to show up in the colour grey. It'll be the same for Andrew Conway, who's been injured since the middle of 2022, and Devon Toner, who's retired, for example. So we'll start off with the loose head prop, and this is a decently good looking chart. Andrew Porter in the lead, Cian Healy, an experienced player to come off the bench as he normally does. He's the second choice. Dave Kilcoyne, of course. Ed Byrne, though, he hasn't played for a while, so I guess the key to this chart is getting Lauman more minutes and stuff. He's only played 62 on his test debut, so I think that's going to be the final task ahead of the World Cup, just giving this guy a decent share in case there are a few injuries, because I have not seen Ed Byrne at test level for a wee while, so I'm not 100% sure what's happening there as I am from New Zealand. But we'll move on to hooker and see this is perfectly managed. Dave Heffernan, he's only played 95 minutes for Andy Farrell, but that is okay. He is in his 30s, he's a very experienced player, so I think his experience at club level and in the Schiller era there rather, that kind of does make it seem a little bit better. As we can see though, perfectly well done. Ronan Kelleher, Dan Sheehan, two guys in form, both have a very similar share of the depth chart. So whoever starts at hooker is basically just going to come down to form between those two. And Rob Herring, the guy who's played the most minutes in the Andy Farrell era, he's also the guy with the most caps at hooker. So Rob Herring, I do think, is going to be the guy coming off the bench at all times, no matter who's starting, because he has become so good at closing out games. We now move over to the tight head prop chart. This is looking like a really good chart, aside from the fact that we take into consideration that Porter, as we can see over here, has converted over to loose head prop in order to become a regular starter for his country. So Furlong's got a decent share. He's not being over-relied on by any means. Finlay Beelam's done well, Tom O'Toole's starting to come of age, and obviously we can see John Ryan in grey over here. So I guess the main thing for Andy Farrell is to find a fourth choice player before this World Cup and just get a young guy a few more caps up in case there are injuries over at tight head prop, because you do not want to move Porter back. He's so good at number one, you just can't do that to yourself, man. Now over at lock, we're seeing a bit of an erratic share of the depth chart. There's a few grey minutes due to a few retirements and some moves overseas for the likes of Quinn Rue. Tyke Byrne, though, obviously is going to be leading. We're seeing a bit of a phenomenon where Andy Farrell's only really blooded 3 players for a jersey. We see that with Henderson and Ryan Beard. Kieran Treadwell, though, he's a wee bit behind Beard, so as Beard's also younger, a development for the future, that is really going to strengthen Beard's case for World Cup selection. There's a few guys who aren't really getting too many minutes down the bottom here, and that's okay though, because James Ryan takes up a massive share of the number 5 depth chart. So this a bit erratic look, it's okay because there's some quite clear structure over here, guys. Henderson, interestingly, is the second choice for both number 4 and for number 5, so that's going to be very, very good for him as he'll look to come off the bench at the World Cup. Tyke Burns also played a few minutes at 5, same with Beard, so when we see these 4 guys and also the fact that these Three others besides James Ryan have had far more minutes at 4 than they have at 5. It's pretty obvious those are going to be the 4 locks selected for the World Cup. So it's okay that James Ryan's getting a bit of a lopsided share, as it's looking a bit more like a proper depth chart over at number 4. We now move over to 6. Peter O'Mahony's played massive minutes. We can all expect that. Caelan Doris, though, the first choice number 8 is also the second choice at blindside flanker. This is because Jack Conan comes off the bench a fair bit and comes on to play 8, so Doris moves out of the 8 position when Conan comes onto the pitch. Tyke Byrne, interestingly, he's the third choice at 6 despite being a lock, so Cian Prendergast getting him more minutes I think is going to be paramount, because he seems to be the guy there rather that Farrell seems to think is the successor to Peter O'Mahony. Few odd minutes here and there. Reece Ruddock, I don't think he's on the radar anymore. Need to do a few things about these minutes, whereas the 309, that's just from a few injuries, things like that, so gushing for those guys. We now move over to open side. Will Connors, man, I'm absolutely devastated for him. He's been out of the game for a long time, and so Josh van der Fleer hasn't really got any cover, but it's okay. Timoney and O'Mahony at 7 have had a decent look in. Timoney has performed well whenever he has actually got the game time, so at least there are backup options for van der Fleer, as we can see. Very much a lopsided depth chart. If Connors, for example, was fit to play, this would be looking like a perfect depth chart there rather, but as we can see, the guy that would be the second choice is out, so that's a real shame. Paul Boyle and Dave Heffernan just finishing it off here with a few minutes as injury cover. Over to number 8 though, this is a real concern. When CJ Stander retired, they never really brought in a third choice player. Jack Conan obviously played far more minutes in the post-Stander era, and Gavin Coombs did get a full 80 at one stage, whereas obviously Caelan Doris is the first choice. He's now overtaken Stander, as has Conan, but finding a fourth choice or even just getting decent minute for Coombs, man, it's a real worry, because this depth chart is not overly balanced. 27% of the minutes are invalid, so hopefully they figure out something to do with it after the Six Nations is concluded, which it obviously has. So yes, World Cup warm-up matches, got to do something about it. We'll now just take a quick ad break, guys. Righto guys, we're back from the ad break, and the 10-14 Rugby, who introduced the depth chart concept to us normies from a coach's point of view, they had a bit of a joke when they did their depth chart videos a few years back on how about Conor Murray would probably have about 100% of the depth chart at 9, but as we can see, the 9 chart has been far better managed by Andy Farrell. Jamison Gibson Park, who is Sexton's Leinster teammate at 9, he has the most share of the minutes. Murray's in its second place, which is great because you get an experienced guy to come off the bench and a guy that's played a lot of 9 with Sexton in the past. And of course, Craig Casey, the guy for the future, the really, really exciting prospect, he's the third choice. It's a bit of a habit of Andy Farrell to only really develop there, 3 guys, but it's okay. There's a lot of decent structure, and if they can just find a guy who's a fourth choice for the World Cup, that is okay. It's actually pretty normal for third and fourth choice players to not have a lot of caps before a World Cup, so that's alright. Over to 10 though, this has been beautifully managed. You can clearly see the first, second, third, fourth and fifth choice players, with then of course just a few wee minutes for Harry Byrne, Conor Murray and Jack Carty over there at the end. Ross Byrne, though, because he is the 10 for the URC Team of the Year, he's most likely going to have the opportunity to overtake Carberry by the World Cup. And of course, Jack Crowley will have the opportunity to overtake Billy Burns, who's also played a few minutes at 12. While Sexton is clearly a very important player for the Irish, it's got to the stage when they no longer over-rely on him, and he's simply just the best at communicating with the refs and the best at enabling the game plan. I've made an entire video about Sexton and why he's so effective. We now move over to midfield. As you can see, this has been really well managed for the first, second, third choice as well, with Archie leading the minutes, Henshaw with the second and Stuart McCloskey in third. McCloskey, I think, might have a decent chance of going to the World Cup when you look at this like this. McCloskey's played far more minutes than James Hume, Jimmy O'Brien and others at midfield, so O'Brien will mostly be covering the outside backs if this is anything to tell us. Archie will be able to swap with Henshaw though, because as we can see, he's also played the third to most minutes over at number 13. So Henshaw is the guy with the second most at 13 and at 12, which is awesome because he covers both positions. Gary Ringrose, of course, leads the 13 depth chart, so James Hume probably not going to get in. Keith Earls no longer really seen as that utility back, so he's looking like he's getting phased out of the team, and obviously we can see a few invalid minutes there to Chris Farrell. We now go over to the wingers, and well, to be honest, who you start at wing doesn't really matter at a World Cup. They just need to be a guy in form, but they're going for experience in order to use a winger as an extra distributor, hence why they've got a bit more of a structure to this one, with Lowe as the first choice, followed by Stockdale, Hansen and Keenan, and then Earls, with Jimmy O'Brien then getting a full 80 against Australia. So there's a fair bit of depth building going on for wingers, which is very unusual to see. But with Stockdale being so far behind, I do think his days are getting numbered. We now go over to 14, we can see Andrew Conway's invalid minutes, and though Mac Hansen didn't make his debut till 2022, he is the guy who is leading the 14 depth chart for minutes. We can also see Keith Earls is behind him, Robert Balakoon as well if they want to go for a guy in form for the World Cup. Well, he's a guy they can call up for injury cover. He's played a decent share of the minutes as well, whereas Jordan Lama, Shane Daly, Ringrose, Hume, Byrne, all far down, so I think it's pretty well covered with Mac Hansen being the number 14. We now go over to fullback to finish everything off before we get on to the most important player. Hugo Keenan, man, that is phenomenal. 73% of the minutes in his first ever World Cup cycle at Test Rugby. He is really just seen as the guy that's a safe option at the number 15 jersey. He's the only guy that can really be trusted with the boot and with the defence, so it's a very interesting depth chart to see how much of the share he takes up. But despite this, there's still structure. Stockdale clearly the second choice, Lama clearly the third choice, Michael Lowry obviously just needs a few more minutes, and obviously Jimmy O'Brien, he's played pretty much everywhere, so I'm not too worried about his share because he can cover. Though it's such a lopsided chart with Keenan taking up such a huge share, there are also guys like Robbie Henshaw who can drop back to fullback. So though Hugo Keenan's got nearly 74% of the minutes, I'm not too alarmed, as there is indeed the versatility of other players who can help out. I mean, Mac Hansen even played the last 4 minutes of a test at fullback once, so they aren't short of options. The main one, though, has just had an overwhelming share of the minutes. Now, the most important player in the Andy Farrell era, it has been Caelan Doris, in my opinion. Caelan Doris has been absolutely immense. This has been his first World Cup cycle of Test Rugby, and quite frankly, there is not a lot of depth in the loose forwards. We saw this with number 8, that there's only 3 guys with a decent share of minutes, and of course Doris is the first. He's the second choice player over at 6 as well, with O'Mahony is the first, and he's been able to pack down at lock as well if worst comes to worst with injuries and stuff like that. So his total of 1,946 test minutes is the 4th most of any player in the Andy Farrell era, and because there are guys like Timony and O'Mahony who can cover 7 for Van der Fleer, I'm not as worried about 7, but compared to number 8, which is a key decision-making position, that's crucial. And Caelan Doris, for a young man, he has done a massive share of the load shedding at number 8. He would have lost so many kilojoules of food he's eaten, just sweating it all out, playing his heart out for his nation. Caelan Doris at just 25 years old, he has got a massive future, and due to the lack of depth at number 8 and the loose forwards in general, well, I do think we have to look at the most important jersey in the loose forwards, see this as a key decision-making position, part of the spine, and wow, Caelan Doris, that's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching this one, guys. I really appreciate it. Just make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to me if you enjoyed it. I really appreciate you guys for viewing, so thank you very much from Max.